Hey guys, it's me, Pallid Moth, and today we are talking about Mars, the Roman god of war, while I do this really badass red, fiery eyeshadow look, so if you're interested in that, please keep watching. Okay, you guys are going to be getting a break from the Slavs for a bit. Today we're talking about the Roman war god Mars. I figured I would do about 3 or 4 episodes before jumping back into Slavic mythology, and I'm probably going to start it back up again when I talk about Baba Yaga. But I figured that doing a few war gods, so spoiler alert, the next video is going to be about Ares. But I figured doing a few war gods would be a natural segue after covering Eurylo. And if you didn't catch my last video, Eurylo is the Slavic god of spring agriculture, and some accounts list him as a god of war. So let's get into it. Mars, as we know him, is the Roman god of war, and he also has a planet named after him. And if you know about astrology, that typically shows where you have fire, ambition, and passion within your astrology chart. As the war god of the Roman pantheon, Mars is thought to be second only to Jupiter. There were festivals held for Mars in the spring and fall. The spring represented the beginning of agriculture and military times for the Romans, and fall represented the end. The month of March was actually named after Mars, and it makes a lot of sense considering the fact that the zodiac sign Aries, A-R-I-E-S, not A-R-E-S, we will get into him in a bit, the zodiac sign is actually ruled by the planet Mars. The season of Aries always begins around the spring solstice. The separate festivals for Mars include his birthday on March 1st, the Aquaria, I don't know how to pronounce that, of March 14th, the Mamuralia of March 15th, and the Agonia Martial of March 17th, finishing off the month with something called the Tibilustrium of March 23rd. Mars is also associated with the month of October, which makes a lot of sense. The zodiac sign Scorpio is exalted in Mars. The Scorpio season begins at the end of October. The Festival of the October Horse is held on October 15th, and it is a 2-horse chariot race. On October 19th, the purification of weapons was complete, and they were officially stored away for the winter. Now, his lineage is where the lore gets a little murky, but we're going to get into that. Most know him as the son of Juno, or the son of Juno and Jupiter together. One telling states that Juno resented the fact that Jupiter gave birth to Minerva without need of a mother, so she received a magical flower from the goddess Flora, and she was able to give birth using this flower, and that's how she conceived Mars. I also want to note that since Minerva was mentioned, she is the goddess of strategic warfare. So they're both war deities, and they're very intertwined, and I will get into that later. So Juno is not only Rome's supreme goddess, but also the goddess of childbirth and abundance, and she plays a huge role in Mars' reputation as the protector of crops. Mars originated actually as an agricultural god. It fertilized the earth with rain and thunder, and in early Rome, the farmers were also soldiers. So as the military became the empire's most valuable asset, Mars became recognized as the god of war, protecting the soldiers and ensuring their victory and prosperity. Before I continue, I want to try something new with my cream blush. I'm using my Essence Baby Got Blush in the shade 10 Tickle Me Pink. I usually just go straight in and use it cold on my cheeks, but I want to try to warm it up on my hand first and then go in with a brush. It's a much lighter shade than what I usually wear, but I'm trying to have more variety in my blush collection. What I like about this Essence blush is that it's very faint and subtle, but it gives you a very nice glow from within feel. I like how this is laying, having warmed up on my hands a lot more. I can tell it's not pulling my foundation up from my skin. So as I mentioned earlier, Minerva was the goddess of strategic warfare, so she handled the logistics and the economic parts of it. Mars was thought to be a fierce protector and warrior and associated with rage and ambition, but not quite like Ares. Them being war gods is about where their similarities begin and end, but I will get into that later. Mars's domain includes the raw chaos and bloodshed of war. He is a very fierce and unrelenting fighter, and he wields his weapons solely in the name of protecting Rome. As always, I'm using my Milani baked blush in the shade Dolce Pink just to set this cream. I like this technique I just used because usually I struggle with my blush just disappearing, but I feel like you can actually see it today, and it blended very nicely and it's not patchy at all. This is the technique I'm probably going to use from now on. I'm trying another technique with my bronzer too, because I noticed that sometimes it goes on really harsh. So I'm going to try to take it straight from the stick to the brush and see how that goes instead of directly on my face. So even though Mars is generally considered slightly more peaceful than other war gods, he still very much represents all the crazy emotions and chaos associated with war, hence where Minerva comes in to give the strategic and intellectual edge to warfare. I actually really like how my bronzer is laying today with this technique. So I guess the moral of the story with your creams is that you never go directly in with the stick on your face. You always want to use your hand or a brush as the buffer in between. So back to Mars. He should not be conflated with Ares' temperament from Greek mythology. In fact, Ares was considered one of the Greek pantheon's most disliked gods because of his temper. Where Mars protects and respects Roman values, Ares is a violent, destructive force. I usually never go in with like a warm tone bronzer powder, and I do have a cool toned one, but I'm really feeling using this e.l.f. quad and using this light shade here. I'm just going to take a very small amount of it, tap it off, and then... I feel like this blush needs something a little bit warmer just to complement it. This is not to say that just because Mars has less temper than Ares does not mean that some of his actions were not any less deplorable. There is a very famous painting when it comes to Mars, and it is his assault of Rhea Silvia. Rhea gave birth to Mars's children, Romulus and Remus, and she was also the granddaughter of Numitor, the rightful king of Alba Longa. I'm using my Milani Make It Last matte setting spray just to get rid of the powdery look. I got this the other day at Ulta, and I already really like it. It has a bit of a fragrance to it, which I don't usually use setting sprays with fragrance. All of mine have been fragrance-free, but I actually like this. It's just subtle enough that it adds a nice little something to my routine. Anyways, back to Mars and what happened with Rhea Silvia. Her uncle Amulius usurped the throne and forced her to become a Vestal Virgin, which is basically a priestess of Vesta who would be required to take a 30-year vow of chastity to ensure that she would have no heirs to challenge the throne. Well, Mars assaulted her and she became pregnant with Remus and Romulus. When Amulius discovered the pregnancy, he ordered Rhea to be burned alive and the twins cast into the Tiber River, and servants took pity on the babies and instead placed them in a basket and sent them down the river. You might notice these names, Remus and Romulus, as Rome's founders, mind you. Most versions of the story, unfortunately, conclude with the punishment and death of Rhea Silvia, but some variations try to put a happier, more optimistic spin on it by saying that the river god Tiberinus saved her from her death. So I always want to mention whenever I talk about gods like this, it's that for everything they represent, most of them are very morally dubious and or bankrupt, but the stories are so interesting. There is a more lighthearted story involving Mars, and it's what happened between him and the goddess Anna Perenna, and she is the goddess of the new year. I want to note that Anna Perenna is often depicted as an old woman. So one day Mars asked her for help winning Minerva's heart, and many accounts state that Mars tried on many accounts to court Minerva, but she just kept turning him down, rejecting him. She didn't want his ass. Anna Perenna, knowing that she couldn't do a damn thing to help him, kept deceiving Mars with promises of help and even told him that Minerva would come to his house soon. Mars did not know that it was not Minerva who showed up at his house. It was Anna Perenna disguised as her. Without hesitation, Mars rushed to kiss her, and then he discovered to his horror that she was not actually Minerva. And now we're going to get back into Mars's actual symbolism and legacy, aside from crazy stories about him. As I said earlier, Mars controlled war as well as all of the emotions surrounding it. His weapon of choice was a spear wrapped in a laurel to symbolize peace, and I always like to think of that similar to how Eurylo from Slavic mythology carries a sword in one hand but an olive branch in the other. It shows what kind of war gods they are. They aren't here just to destroy everything. They're trying to show peace through strength eventually. Y'all probably know how the story between Mars and Venus goes, but in case you don't, I'll do a quick recap. Venus was married to Vulcan, who was the god of forge. So the fact that Mars and Venus had an affair was quite a scandal, and they definitely made themselves known. Vulcan actually trapped them in an invisible bronze net for all the other gods to witness and laugh at as a result of this affair. With Venus, Mars's children became gods of certain emotions. He had Timer and Metis, the gods of fear and terror. He also had Concordia, who was Timer's twin sister, who embodied the characteristics of harmony, peace, and fellowship. I also want to circle back to Minerva because during the Trojan War, Mars and Minerva frequently took opposing sides. In one of their most famous clashes, Minerva struck Mars with a heavy stone, knocking his ass out and crushing his armor within the dirt. And then when Venus attempted to rescue Mars, Minerva struck her down as well. She was not having any of it. I also want to note that Mars actually had a group of kids called the Cupids. Them little shits that run around with the bow and arrow and make everyone fall in love. He's the reason for them. Let's get into a few aspects of Mars worship. Believe it or not, the Roman pagan sector is not that big. Like, I found even less information about active worshippers of the Roman gods than I did for anything regarding Slavic mythology, which I found really interesting. Back in the day, the Romans would typically offer bulls and rams to Mars as a sacrifice, and on special occasions, Mars was honored with a triple offering of sacrificial pig, ram, and bull. And one of my favorite little facts about people who worship Mars and any of the Roman gods is that the Romans of the past and modern day pagans who worship the Roman gods, they never kneel. They don't kneel to their gods, and they certainly don't kneel to anyone else. And I think that that's super metal. I've really been having fun putting little rhinestones in my makeup recently. I have so many of them sitting around, but I so rarely use them. I want to start to use them more often. Really like how this eye look came out. This was very much a trust the process kind of deal for me because I was actually using my About Face Fluid eye paints today. Specifically the shade Vintage Grenada was the first one I went in with. And these are always so hit or miss for me because I love the colors, but these formulas have such a learning curve and I feel like I finally figured out how to use them aside from just doing graphic liner, so hell yeah. So whenever I think about Mars energy, whether it be the planet, the god and what he represented to the Roman people, I always find it very empowering. I know that it's typically associated with more like masculine energy, but to hell with all that. I find it very empowering to embrace your anger and embrace your rage. There's a study that came out that showed that if you suppress your anger, it puts you more at risk of developing an autoimmune disease. And with all of my shit I got going on right now, I might as well just let it all out, and it's very cathartic, and I encourage you all to channel some Mars energy into your life. For a lip combo today, y'all, I'm getting a little crazy with it. I'm going in with two lip liners, and then I'm covering it with a gloss. I'll be right back. All right, y'all, and that's the look. I hope you guys enjoyed learning more about Mars and everything associated with him. My next video is going to be about Venus to finish the story, and then the next one will be about Aries, just to jump back into War Gods for a bit, and after Aries, I will be doing Minerva. So you guys can look forward to all of that. And did you know that a group of moths is called an eclipse, and that if you subscribe to this channel, you can join my eclipse? I think that would be very cool. Thank you so much for watching.